Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more buckshot testing. And today we've got another new shell that we've never tried before, and it's one that a couple of you guys have actually suggested that I go try and track some down and test them and see what they could do. I think there was one or two of you that said you had seen good results out of them, and the other couple just wanted to see what they could do. So I'm definitely curious to see if they're decent or if they're complete junk, because they are a very cheap budget oriented shell. But as for those shells I've got here today, I went and picked up some of these Monarch 12 gauge buckshot shells. You can get a box of 25 shells at Academy for, I believe it's $12. So if these are any decent, then that's a pretty good deal at roughly 50 cents a round or so. Not nearly as cheap as what some buckshot was, 5, 6, 7 years ago, but considering the Winchester and Federal stuff you see on the shelf all the time, if these are decent, then they are a very budget oriented shell. But these ones are a 12 gauge, 2 3/4 inch, 9 pellet loaded double-aught buck, moving about 1,345 feet per second. And here's what one of those shells looks like. They are these orange holes. And this is kind of what concerns me here. I'll get some close-up pictures so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But if you can look down in there and see, there is no buffer material and there is no wad, it would appear. And if you've been around the channel for any length of time, then you have probably seen some of the cheap buckshot shells we've tried that are loaded the same as what these appear to be, and they tend to really pattern pretty terribly, to say the least. So I guess we'll see what happens here. I know one or two of you guys had said that they do pretty decently, but I have my doubts coming into it. I hope they prove me wrong, but based on some previous results I've seen out of shells loaded the same as these appear to be, I don't have the highest of hopes for them, especially with how cheap they are, but we'll see what happens. And as for the setup we've got to run them through today, I brought out the Remington 1187 with the factory stock full choke. It measures out right at a 688 constriction for those curious. This setup has been proven to do well with any decently loaded buckshot shell, and typically this is where I start. It may not be the best performer for a certain in particular shell, but it's a reliable starting point if nothing else. So we'll see what it can do. But as for the test today, everything is set up the same as usual. I've got the big sheet of paper at 40 yards. I've got the chronograph so we can get our velocity results, and I've got the templates we can lay up over our target so we can get a better reference as to how the shells would have performed in some more real life scenarios. So enough talking, let's head over here and take this shot and just see if these Monarch shells might be a decent option for how cheap they are, or if they might just be complete junk. Okay, so that shell gave us 1276 through the chrono. The box claim is 1345, so we are a little bit under that claim, but high 1200s I think is pretty realistic for a pretty standard loaded double-aught buck. They're definitely nothing special, I can tell you that. So even though we didn't really see quite their claim out of a 28-inch barrel in that 1187, I think it's a pretty realistic velocity overall. But what kind of a pattern did they actually give us down at 40 yards? Let's go check it out and see if we got some kind of a decent usable result. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and this is what we got. And I gotta say, seeing how this shell was loaded initially, it is honestly a little better than what I was expecting to see. It is very clearly nowhere near, flight control type of territory or anything like that. But we have seen way, way worse out of shells that are loaded the same, or maybe even potentially a little bit better. Shells that had buffer material in them and stuff. So considering how cheap these shells are and how they're loaded, that's not a terrible result right there. Now we had all 9 of our pellets on the paper, and I did measure the farthest 2 points across, which was the far bottom right pellet up to this top left pellet up here, and it gave us a 31.5-inch spread. So definitely not impressive by the numbers, but as you can see right in our core area here, we have a decent amount of pellets right there. So this is a pretty interesting result. Now, is it repeatable, seeing as though how these are loaded and how cheap they are? That I don't know. We will just have to see as we continue to test them. I definitely want to bring them out here and run them through a bunch of different chokes back to back to back to see maybe what is the best choke for them or something like that. So we will see how consistent they actually might be in that test. But for a starting point here, I don't think it's horrible, all things considered. Is it a pattern I'd hunt with? Probably not just yet, but let's throw a couple of the templates up and just see what kind of real world results we would actually have. Alright, so here's our 10-inch circle, and when we line it up with our core, we had 4 out of the 9 pellets actually in there. So, not bad overall. We've had way more expensive shells with 1 and 2 pellets in there. So, 4 pellets in a 10-inch vital size circle is gonna do the job on whatever you would need it to out at 40 yards. It's nothing groundbreaking, that's for sure, but it's not terrible either. So let's throw the deer template up and just see what it would have looked like if you would have taken this particular shot out in the woods on a hunt. Okay, and here's that deer template, and if we line it up with where our point of aim would have been, we had a definite 5 pellets right through the deer there, 4 of which are right in the vital area. So I guess, if nothing else, this shows that the core area of the pattern definitely has promise. It's just the other 4 pellets being scattered all over the place. There's a couple up there above his back and 1 or 2 down here below him as well. So maybe if we can tune in some of those other pellets, these might be a pretty decent performing shell. So not terrible. As for the deer template here, you would have absolutely come home with that deer all day long. But let's throw the hog template up real quick for a few seconds just to take a look at that one as well. Okay, and here's that hog template, and it probably should be a couple inches farther to the left, but I couldn't really do that with how my clips have to clamp it onto the target. Either way, it is pretty much the same story. You would have at least 4 of them right through the main vital area, and 1 or 2 that would have hit just somewhere else around the edges. So would you have come home with that hog? Yeah, probably so. So at the end of the day here, I gotta say, it is a little better than what I was expecting to see. But I do think we need to do a bunch more testing with it to see how reliably consistent it actually patterns. But for a starting point here with these shells, we definitely have a lot of room to work with, I'd say. Definitely not terrible right off the bat. Alright, y'all. Well, what did you think about those results right there? They are definitely nothing that is super impressive or groundbreaking or anything like that. We've seen way better than that with much more expensive loads and much more fancier loads, that's for sure. But considering how cheap they are and how they're loaded with no buffer, no wad, no plating, no anything to help them, we could have seen way worse than that. So I do think there is a little bit of promise that with just the right choke, we might be able to get them a little bit better than that even. But that's just going to take some testing and seeing how consistent they are and what they like and don't like. But at the end of the day here, that just might be a little better than what I was expecting to see coming into it. I definitely wouldn't call the shells amazing, but they don't seem to be just garbage either, that's for sure. So I guess I'll leave it up to you guys. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of these Monarch double-aught buck shells? And if so, what kind of results have you seen from them? Would you hunt with that pattern? Would it be just kind of a range day type of shell for you with how cheap they are? And is there another choke combo that you might want to see those run through? Let me know all your thoughts down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.